Jay here for Stretford Paddock, and this is a little look at the man who is known as Scott McTominay. He's had quite a productive international break, hasn't he? Old McSauce, as some people like to call him. He scored the 2 goals against Cyprus, and people went, okay, yeah, fair enough, decent, can't knock that. Scoring 2 goals for your country, but, it's only Cyprus. But then he gets 2 goals in an epic 2-0 victory over Spain, and people are starting to sit up and take notice of Scott McTominay. And there's a few articles floating about and conversations being had about whether Scott McTominay is good enough for Manchester United, because it's been like an age-old argument, hasn't it? Is he really good enough? It's never really been settled. It's just a debate that seems to rage on and on. At first, there was the argument that him and Fred did a job. You saw Manchester United getting to near the top of the table and people going, okay, maybe Fred could work. Then, of course, things started to go drastically wrong, and they went badly wrong under Ralph Rangnick, and people started to look at our midfield in particular and go, why isn't it working? And it felt to me as though Fred was getting a little bit more credit because he did have some better performances, whilst McTominay seemed to take a step backwards. This season, earlier on in the season, McTominay had a little purple patch, but then Casemiro comes in, and let's not forget, for a little spell, McTominay was keeping him out of the team, but then Casemiro does get the place in the team, and he does show what United have been missing in that defensive midfield area. We're going to look at several things here. We're going to look at his stats. We're going to look at an Athletic article which is speaking about him as well, which goes into some detail. And I want you lot to get involved in the comments and just let us know what you think about Scott McTominay. He's obviously a player that divides opinion. He's a player that a lot of fans look at and go, look, came through the academy, won the Jose Mourinho inaugural Manager Player of the Year award. I think he was given that on a bit of a whim, if we're being honest, when Jose got fed up with the fact David De Gea was going to win the Players' Player again. And he's someone that has scored some important goals as well. I know he's not a goal scorer, but you look at the goals against Leeds, for example. But then there's a flip side to that. You look at times when he's been accused of going missing. He's been accused of almost being a little bit cowardly sometimes. People say he hides, he doesn't show for the ball, he doesn't do enough. And there's that problem as well of being compared to Casemiro. Casemiro, for me, is one of the best defensive midfielders on the planet. I don't even think that's an outrageous statement. I think it's a pretty beige one. Scott McTominay is probably not even a defensive midfielder. He used to be a striker, didn't it? Then he became a sort of a midfielder, and then he was used as a 6, when you could argue he'd be more suited to an 8 and even maybe a 10. So we'll get into all that, and I want you guys to get involved too. So first of all, let's just recap what happened the other night. There was lots of articles doing the rounds. I'll pick one out. It says Scotland record famous 2-0 win over Spain as Scott McTominay nets twice at Hampden Park, taking his tally to 4 in just 2 matches to put Steve Clarke's side top of Euro qualifying group. I mean, Spain don't lose Euro qualifiers very, very rarely, and to beat them was a big achievement. You can't dismiss that, and you've got to look at Scott McTominay's part in that, getting those 2 goals. Well done, Scott McTominay. Even if you're not a fan, you've got to give him credit there. Come on, you've beaten a very good Spanish side, and you've got the 2 goals that have helped to do it. Funny how as well, you saw Rodri losing his mind a little bit, didn't he? Accusing Scotland of not playing football the right way and playing boring and negative tactics and all that sort of bit of jazz. But you have to give Steve Clarke and Scott McTominay and the Scottish team credit, because you look at the players they've got available, you look at the levels, you look at who Spain have got, to get that win was huge. And Scott McTominay was obviously a big, big part of it. Now, on the back of that, The Athletic have done an article, and this is Laurie Whitwell and Carl Anker, 2 of my favourite journalists who've been on this podcast and been on this channel several times. They do their homework, they know their stuff. They've wrote an article between them talking about Scott McTominay, and it says, should Scott McTominay be part of Manchester United's future? Now, the article goes on to say, sort of as you'd expect from any Athletic article, especially with those 2, because they like to do the deep dive, don't they? They don't just do little clickbaity 200-word articles, do they? They go back to what happened a few years ago under Jose Mourinho. It says, it was 2018, Manchester United's end of season awards show, and Jose Mourinho decided to surprise Scott McTominay with an impromptu speech and gift. The award was just made up on the spot, but a good idea in hindsight. Manager's Player of the Year. The gift was one of the candlesticks on the table, apparently, polished up and given to a then 21-year-old Scott McTominay, who had made 23 appearances in all competitions that season. So it goes on to talk about his breakthrough. I would say it was a bit weird. He made his senior team debut towards the tail end of 2016-17, but the fixture that everyone remembers is the 0-0 draw with Sevilla in the Champions League in February 2018. For some reason, Mourinho opted to play the inexperienced McTominay, who had made only 15 appearances, over Paul Pogba. The Scotsman was adequate in midfield and will receive praise from Mourinho that read as a coded, he does what he is told, unlike someone messaged to the benched Paul Pogba. So already there, you're going to upset a lot of fans because fans are looking at it going, why is Paul Pogba, who's arguably our best player, not playing, and this kid, who hasn't really proven himself yet, starting? Oh, because he does as he's told. Is that really a reason to drop your best player and play someone who's relatively unproven? It feels like, you're getting off almost on the wrong foot with some fans, not all. Some fans are going to be looking at it going, who's this guy? What's Jose doing? This is all wrong. And then it goes on to say, through no fault of his own, McTominay became embroiled in the strange Cold War between Mourinho and Pogba. It wasn't just that as well with McTominay. It wasn't just this little battle that he inadvertently got dragged into. There was also the defensive issue as well. Because I remember McTominay playing as part of a centre-back three at times. I think there was one game at West Ham where he did it. And this seemed to be Jose Mourinho sending a message to the board that he hadn't got the defender he wanted. So I'm going to play McTominay. He even played Herrera at one point in defence, It was like a little sort of a moan and a sort of indication, look, this is how unhappy I am. You haven't given the players I've got, so I've got to play this young midfielder in defence. And again, that's not McTominay's fault. And fair play to the lad because he played there and he does his best. But it sort of tarnishes you with that negative brush where people are going, oh, this guy's in the team just because the manager wants to prove a point. That's not what we should be doing at Manchester United. Now, going on to sort of more modern fare, when we're talking about Scott McTominay more recently. So it says, in the weeks Erik ten Hag played him over Casemiro, the Dutchman cited the midfielder's aerial ability and his power. But the chance of the United coach building future style 11s or squads that could need skills to play more than 60% of the games a season are dwindling. As United improve, McTominay might find himself from being a valued dressing room presence to most obvious upgrade flippable midfield asset. Flippable is the word they use. It's someone you can change. So you get this argument, don't you, that is McTominay at the levels that you need? Now, if you want to sort of compare him to Casemiro, I think that's the most obvious sort of comparison. I've got some stats here that I'm going to go through. So, if the prototype for Ten Hag's deep line midfielder is a Frankie de Jong type, then McTominay is the furthest thing from this, because just putting the Casemiro point to one side at the minute, we know that Erik ten Hag wants a Frankie de Jong. He wants Frankie de Jong, and he wants a deep line midfielder who can do the sort of, pick passes out and help us control the game. So, having a look at that, McTominay ranks in the bottom 20 for 21% for missed controls per 90, bottom 30 for 4% for progressive carries, bottom 33% for touches. That's not someone who sits deep and controls the tempo of the game. Ten Hag's deep line midfielder is usually a playmaker. This is difficult to achieve with Scott McTominay's lack of ball progression ability. That's something where he falls a little bit short. Now, if you're going to compare him to Casemiro when it comes to passing ability, passes completed, Casemiro's in the top 27%, McTominay's in the bottom 30%. Total passing distance, Casemiro top 22%, McTominay bottom 27%. Progressive passing distance, Casemiro top 7%, McTominay bottom 28%. So it's not just the tackling and stuff like that Casemiro can do. He's also very good on the ball. We see him picking out passes. We see how he can pick out long and short range passes. McTominay isn't in that same level, or isn't at that same level. And that's a sort of, not a flaw as such, but it's detriment to him and whether he's good enough to play for Manchester United, because you've got a player who can do all the things you need a midfielder to do better than Scott McTominay can do them. And that's a bit of an issue. Now, let's not forget, McTominay has been linked with a move away as well. This isn't just, we're just sort of plucking this out of thin air. Newcastle have been linked with him. Apparently, they're interested in buying him in the summer. And there is talk of him being moved on because United need funds to bring in someone like Frankie de Jong. And when you look at those comparisons, you can understand why Frankie de Jong, who is a player that, of course, Erik ten Hag knows from his time at Ajax and wanted this summer, don't forget, you can see why he's preferred by the manager, as far as we know. Anyway, so there is that element to it where you compare him to Casemiro, you compare him to Frankie de Jong, and the comparisons don't do McTominay any favours. Now, there is another argument as well. There's about his mentality. His mentality feeds the collective mood. So it says here in this Athletic article, given United's flirtation with financial fair play rules, McTominay represents a player of value who could be sold to generate funds from Ten Hag can spend on signing suited to his style. Talks about Newcastle making inquiries as well. So Ten Hag will again be central to whether McTominay leaves United this summer, and a transfer fee, if they've said 30 million quid, could be channeled to recruit the striker that might transform United's prospects. But letting McTominay leave would also erode some of the spirit of the club. So this spirit, this attitude, this sort of presence that he has is a factor that should be considered. McTominay is known as, a sort of decent person to have around the squad. He says players should not just be kept around because they joined us when they were 6, as is the case with McTominay. And United do need to get better at selling players, but McTominay has shown he can play at Champions League level in specific circumstances, and beyond that, he helps to maintain standards at the club. This is the debate, isn't it? The age-old debate. Does he? Is he someone who... Now, when you talk about maintaining standards, obviously his attitude, he's correct, and he knows what it's like to be at Manchester United, albeit as a kid, when we were very, very successful. But ability-wise, does he have enough in his locker? That's the question. It's not about his attitude. It's not about whether he knows what Manchester United are about. It's not about his effort and his energy. It's about whether he is good enough to play for Manchester United. Now, we've seen in the recent game against Spain, we've seen it in fits and starts and times at Manchester United, where we've seen some really good performances from Scott McTominay. The question is, can he do it consistently enough? I always say, to be a player at Manchester United, even a squad player, you have to be good enough for the first team. You don't have a squad as such. You have, for me, 14, 15 first team players. Players that will consider themselves first team. Now, you look at Fred this season. Fred's practically first team. But if everyone's fit, he probably doesn't start. But he's played a lot of games and he's been effective in those games. Can you say the same about Scott McTominay? Now, one thing that sort of Athletic article wraps up by saying is his versatility is a major asset, and he can play up top too, not to be overlooked, given Ten Hag's options. At 6'4", he is useful in attacking and defensive set pieces. He has a knack for time when he runs into the box to score, as proven by his 4 goals in 4 days for Scotland. You can't sniff at that. He has 18 goals and 5 assists in 202 games for United, mainly from defensive midfield. So not exactly setting the world alight, but not terrible when he's playing as a DM. Fletcher and John O'Shea had similar roles at United, playing 735 games between them. John O'Shea, obviously, was your ultimate utility man, and contributing to teams that won titles and reached Champions League finals because of the structure and quality around them, as well as their own abilities. Ten Hag has that kind of ambition, and McTominay can help. So, it's an interesting point there, isn't it? Can McTominay be part of a squad the way that someone like John O'Shea was, and help us as a squad player, especially if next season you'd expect we're going to go into, or we should be up for challenging for titles and hopefully getting in the Champions League and trying to do bits there? Or is he just not quite at the levels you need? The stats don't back him up as being someone who should be starting for Manchester United. But because of the other points I've mentioned, because of the fact he is willing to play everywhere, he does have a good attitude, he does have the right energy. We have seen him as well play midfield many times for Manchester United and playing a Manchester United side that didn't finish second. Is he good enough? I'll let you answer that one. Personally, I think the summer might be when we see the end of Manchester United and Scott McTominay. And if that is the case, I wish him well. I'm just not sure, not 100% sure he's quite at the level we need. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. Get involved in the chat in the comments. Let us know what you think about Scott McTominay. Is he good enough for Manchester United Football Club? I've been Jay Motti. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.